In white sands, ancient footprints appear, then vanish ghostly. Evidence trapped in the earth. When scientists tested the seeds inside, the date came back 23,000 years old, impossibly old, rewriting America's story. If humans were truly here during the Ice Age, surrounded by giant sloths and impassable ice, how did they survive? The answer defies everything we thought we knew. Before sunrise, a ranger walks the empty flats of white sands, eyes scanning for something rare. The ground looks smooth and unbroken, until a shift in the breeze or a rise in humidity brings them out. Footprints, dozens, maybe hundreds, begin to appear in the gypsum soil. They stretch across the ancient lake bed, only visible when the moisture is just right. By midday they fade again, swallowed by the dry wind. These are the ghost tracks, human prints that come and go, as if the past itself is breathing beneath the surface. Each print holds remarkable detail. You can see the ball of the foot, the curve of the arch, the splay of toes pressing into soft mud. Some are small, likely made by children, while others show the broader, flatter shape of adults who never wore shoes. The impressions are so clear that heel strikes and toe drags can be traced, frozen for thousands of years. The ground here preserves every nuance, each step, pause and stumble recorded in fine gypsum dust. The ranger kneels, brushing away loose grains. In the hollow of one print, something catches the light, a speck of ancient plant matter pressed deep by a barefoot walker. These fleeting clues, locked in the shifting salt and silt, hint at a world long vanished. For a moment, the silence of the desert is filled with the echo of footsteps, a living memory revealed only when the earth decides to give up its secrets. A single seed pressed into the mud by a human foot became the first forensic clue. Scientists at the University of Arizona extracted these seeds, tiny remnants of ditch grass, Ruppia cirrhosa, from the very layers where the prints were found. Using radiocarbon dating, they measured the age of the carbon locked inside. The result was astonishing. The seeds, and by extension the footprints themselves, were about 23,000 years old. This was not just older than any known human site in North America, it was nearly 10,000 years older than the Clovis culture, long thought to be the continent's first people. But the method itself drew immediate scrutiny. Ruppia grows in water, and aquatic plants can absorb ancient carbon from dissolved minerals, carbon that is thousands of years old before the plant even sprouts. If the seeds had picked up this old carbon, the radiocarbon clock would run fast, making the footprints seem far older than they really were. Critics pointed to this reservoir effect, arguing that what looked like Ice Age evidence might actually date to a much later time. Some even suggested the true age could be off by as much as 7,000 years. The controversy grew. Leading archaeologists demanded independent verification. If the seeds were truly ancient, the implications would be seismic. If not, the tracks would slip back into the familiar story of human migration. The seeds, silent and fragile, now held the burden of proof for an entire continent's history, while the scientific world waited for a second opinion. In the aftermath of the dating controversy, a new set of samples arrived at labs across the country. This time the focus shifted from aquatic seeds to the pollen of land plants, tiny grains trapped in the same sediment layers as the footprints. Unlike aquatic plants, pollen takes its carbon straight from the air, sidestepping the problem of ancient carbon in groundwater. Geochronologists at the United States Geological Survey and Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory worked independently, isolating pollen from the exact layers that held the Ruppia seeds. When they measured the radiocarbon signal, the answer was clear. The pollen dated to the same range between 23,000 and 21,000 years ago. The ages lined up in perfect sequence, with older grains deeper down and younger ones above, matching the order of the prints themselves. This terrestrial clue, untouched by the reservoir effect, quieted many skeptics, but the investigation did not stop there. Another team turned to the physics of light. By collecting quartz grains from the same ancient mud, they applied optically stimulated luminescence, known as OSL. This method reveals the last time the minerals were exposed to sunlight before being buried. The quartz from beneath the lowest set of footprints gave a minimum age, more than 21,500 years old. The numbers match the pollen and the seeds, forming a chain of evidence that stretched across different labs, different scientists, and different methods. For the first time, the story of the footprints was anchored by independent clocks, one counting the decay of carbon, the other the fading memory of sunlight. The antiquity of the tracks now stood on solid ground. Children darted along the ancient lakeshore, their bare feet pressing deep into the cool mud. The footprints, some barely the length of a hand, show short, hurried strides, evidence of play or perhaps a game of chase. Teenagers moved alongside them, their steps longer and more confident, weaving paths that sometimes looped back toward the water's edge. In these tracks, the everyday lives of a vanished community come into focus. Families gathering, children testing the limits of their world, adults moving with purpose across the flats. The ground tells a layered story. In some places, human footprints cross the tracks of a giant ground sloth. The sloth's path is not straight. It curves and doubles back, forming wide circles in the mud. These defensive spirals, surrounded by deep claw marks, suggest the animal sensed danger and tried to ward it off. Human prints appear inside the sloth's tracks, matching its stride for several paces before splitting away. The evidence points to more than a passing encounter. Someone tracked this enormous creature closely enough to provoke a reaction, possibly as part of a hunt or a test of courage. The site was not a one-time camp. 7 distinct layers of footprints stacked over 2,000 years reveal repeated visits as the ancient lake came and went with the seasons. Each generation left its mark in the shifting gypsum, returning to a place that offered water, shelter, and the company of both kin and colossal beasts. Against the backdrop of the Ice Age, these tracks are a record of resilience, children's laughter, and sloths' wary circles, all preserved in the quiet mud of a world now lost. At the height of the last Ice Age, a vast wall of ice sealed off the northern continent. The Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific, merging into a frozen barrier that spanned thousands of miles. In places, this glacial fortress rose nearly 2 miles above the land. 23,000 years ago, the so-called ice-free corridor, the only known inland passage between Alaska and the lower 48, was closed tight. No river cut through, and no valley offered a way south. The landscape was locked in a deep freeze, with temperatures plunging and snowfields stretching to the horizon. For early humans, the idea of crossing this expanse on foot defied every physical limit. The footprints at White Sands, pressed into soft mud while this ice wall stood unbroken, present a puzzle that seems impossible. How did people reach the heart of North America when the continent itself was sealed shut by ice? Textbooks once traced the first Americans to a single inland route, marching south from Siberia as the ice sheets melted. Now, the White Sands footprints have forced a new map. With the ice corridor sealed shut 23,000 years ago, the only plausible path left is the Pacific coast, a narrow ribbon of land and seaweed-rich waters, the so-called Kelp Highway. Here, travellers could have skirted the frozen continent by boat or on foot, following tides and foraging along the shore. This idea, once dismissed as speculation, is now gaining ground in classrooms and research labs alike. For many native communities, the science finally echoes what has always been known, that people have belonged to these lands since time beyond memory. The story of the first Americans is no longer a straight line, but a network of journeys, each one as enduring as the prints pressed into ancient mud. Today, every new footprint uncovered at White Sands forces science to question what it thinks it knows. Our timeline of human history in the Americas is no longer settled. It is shifting beneath our feet. The past is not finished surprising us. Drop your thoughts below and join the conversation.